Good morning to you, and welcome back to Bible Break. And today we're having a little sort of break. We started with the story of Jacob and Esau effectively the last time, but now in chapter 26, we're having a little break from that. And we're seeing what Isaac has to do in the time of famine and how he goes back to the Philistine country where his father before him had been before. Um, So we're in Genesis chapter 26. And we're going to read the whole chapter. I think it's verse 1 to verse 35, is it? Yes, verse 1 to verse 35. Reading from my NIV as usual. Genesis 26, Isaac and Abimelech is the subheading in my Bible. Here we go. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the earlier famine of Abram's time. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Excuse me. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt," which is where his father had gone at the time of the first famine. "Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abram. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed. Because Abram obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws." So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, "She's my sister," because he was afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is beautiful. When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife, Rebekah. So Abimelech summoned Isaac and said, "She is really your wife. Why did you say she's my sister?" Isaac answered him, "Honestly," that's my parenthesis, "because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Then Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the men might have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech gave orders to all the people, "Anyone who molests this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold. Because the Lord blessed him, the man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abram, the Philistines stopped up, filling them with earth. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, "Move away from us. You have become too powerful for us." So Isaac moved away from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father, Abram, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abram died. And he gave them the same names his father had given them. Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, "The water is ours." So he named the well Ezek because they disputed with him. Ezek means dispute by all accounts. Then they dug another well, but they quarreled over that one also. So he named it Sitna. He moved on from there and dug another well. There's a real industry of wells here, of infrastructure. And no one quarreled over it. He named it Rehoboth, saying, now the Lord has given us room and we will flourish in the land. From there he went up to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abram. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. Isaac built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord. There he pitched his tent, and there his servants dug a well, another one. Meanwhile, Abimelech had come to him from Gerar with Ahuzat, his personal advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his forces. Isaac asked them, why have you come to me, since you were hostile to me and sent me away? They answered, we saw clearly that the Lord was with you. So we said, there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. Let us make a treaty with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we did not molest you, but always treated you well and sent you away in peace. And now you are blessed by the Lord. Isaac then made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. Early the next morning, the men swore an oath to each other. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. That day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug. They said, we found water. He called it Sheba. And to this day, the name of the town has been Beersheba. When Esau, we're on Esau now, his son, was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and also Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So Isaac now has to cope with his family problems, which his son has brought upon him, together with the problems he already had and has with the Philistines. You may have had it once again, a real sense of deja vu as you read this chapter, because it seems as if there are things that are repeated here. That is, of course, because history repeats itself. You may have wondered, for example, why Isaac has to renew, in effect, the oath that Abimelech had already made with his father. But that is because the agreements that have been made don't necessarily resolve anything. And just as Isaac is revisiting the land that his father had crossed and had dwelt in, so he has to revisit the same type of problems that his father encountered before him. But let's have a little look at this now. It's a famine that takes Abram back in the direction of the Philistines. He will not go to Egypt, though, because like his father before him, he will obey the Lord's direction and the Lord's voice as the Lord reveals himself to him. And so, instead of going to Egypt like his father had done, he stays in the land of the Philistines. And I'd just like to draw your attention to what made for the greatness of Abram. The Lord repeats to Isaac the promise that he made to Abram, and that is now that now Isaac has inherited, as it were, that he will make him prosperous and fruitful, and that Isaac will multiply, and that through his descendants the entire world ultimately shall be blessed. But verse 5, it's not that this God's promise was to Abram was conditional, but it is that we have a key and a clue as to in what lay Abram's greatness, of what consisted Abram's greatness. Verse 5, because Abram obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. So once again, the vital point is brought home to us here that it's all to do with God, God's laws, God's ways. And in what did Abram's greatness consist? Well, not in his own character in and of itself, but in the fact that God revealed himself to Abram, and he brought Abram into a relationship with himself. And it was through this relationship with himself, which consisted in Abram following God and obeying God. And you notice that the emphasis is in verse 5 here is upon me, my. So it's all to do with God, his ways and his laws. And it was in relationship with this God and by the means which this God had presented to Abram that Abram became great. Abram became great because of his relationship with this great God who has made himself known to Abram and who has made himself known to us. So that's the first thing. We see that Isaac has to repeat the ruse that Abram and Sarah used with Abimelech as well as Pharaoh. We won't go back over that. It's repeated several times. We could go into some discussion about that, but we've got to move on to other things now. Sufficient to say that Isaac is back in Abimelech's territory. Abimelech is guaranteeing his protection, and so Isaac gets on with it, plants crops, and gets to work and enjoys immediately the Lord's blessing with his crops. But we read then in verse 14 that he had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. And then in the NIV we are told that so all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abram, the Philistines stopped up filling them with earth. Well, they'd done this before. They'd done this following the death of Abraham, not necessarily upon the return of Isaac. Because they are envious of Isaac's prosperity, and because, for some reason which escapes me, even before Isaac was there, before Isaac had got back, they had blocked up the wells. And I want to focus upon this really for the short couple of minutes or so that's remaining to us, because I want us to ask ourselves the question. I want us to ask the question: why would you do that? Was the jealousy so intense that they could not themselves revisit, that they could not touch what Abram had done? I mean, what I'm trying to say is that surely it would have been far better to have used the wells that had been dug, or at the very least to have just left them alone, rather than block them. If good work has been done, which people are benefiting from, and which you ultimately might benefit from as well, why would you seek to undo the good work which has been done? And so we see here that Isaac has to redouble the efforts to unblock the wells which the Philistines have now blocked, because Isaac is busying himself with providing what is necessary for life, health, wealth, prosperity, Whereas it seems that the Philistines have only busied themselves with blocking and undoing the good which he had done. So a word really here of warning to us that there are these two types of people in all walks of life. You find it in political life, you find it in spiritual life, you find it in business. There are these two types of people. There are those who are looking to construct and make progress, and do them and those around them good. And there are those who only seek to undermine the efforts of those who are doing good and don't appear to have any particularly good project for the benefit of humanity, and don't seem to want to know or want to involve themselves with the good which has already been done, because they've just got their own sort of view with their own agenda. But the reason that the word Philistine has become in our language synonymous with vandalism and thuggery is because that's what it is. These people have nothing to offer anyone else. So all they seek to do is to thwart and undermine the good which has already been done. So I'll leave you with that, and have a good weekend. Bye. See you next time.